Good afternoon, board members. Danita Osborne Morris, COC Grants Coordinator with Clark County Social Service, serving as the collaborative applicant. Today, Brenda, Matt, and I, on behalf of the Census Planning Working Group, wanted to provide you with a quick recap of the 2020 Homeless Census and point in time. First off, we would like to take a moment to send a huge shout out to all of the volunteers, agencies, nonprofit organizations, jurisdictions, and rural communities that took part in this effort to make the 2020 Homeless Census possible. We thank you. Understanding how vital this effort is to our community and making efforts to be innovative and advance our process is the first step toward us working together to end homelessness in Southern Nevada. Thank you for what you have done and will continue to do to improve this process. Volunteers make the difference. While we are still waiting to get some of the volunteer sign-in sheets back from some of the deployment sites, here is a look at some preliminary numbers of those involved in this process. We launched our volunteer recruitment registration in December. In just over a month, we had 325 community volunteers, 76 peer navigators, 115 agency staff, and 40 Clark County Social Service team members and deployment captains, and 12 rural volunteers willing to assist us in this effort. As you are all well aware, during this year's process, the count and survey were conducted simultaneously. For those participants that were willing to complete a survey with one of our volunteers, incentive items were provided. Some agencies passed out hygiene kits, other teams incentivized with bus passes. Our largest push was for socks. Through partnership of Clark County's A-Team or Activities Committee, Red Rock Rotary, and a generous donation from Brazen Architecture's own Monica Gresser and the American Institute of Architecture, our community was able to collect over 5,000 pairs of socks to provide to those individuals experiencing homelessness. Although we feel like we have achieved some great successes with the changes our community brought to this year's process, we know that improvements can be made and parts of the process tweaked to ensure an even more successful count in the years to come. As previously discussed, with this board toward the end of 2019, our community was previously utilizing methodology that was over 12 years old. It was time for us to revisit how that process was done and determine with the use of modern technology where efficiencies in our process could be made. As of 2020, we have officially revised our methodology to include an overnight count and survey of sheltered individuals. We have always conducted a count of those staying overnight in an emergency shelter, transitional housing, or a safe haven program. Historically, this information was pulled from HMIS. However, this year we conducted surveys of sheltered individuals to ensure that HMIS information and data is not only accurate, but that we are obtaining information that truly allows us to compare our sheltered and unsheltered populations. Another change to this year's process was a switch to conducting a count and survey of our unsheltered population entirely during the day. All populations of unsheltered adults, youth, families, tunnels, and rural areas were conducted and surveyed simultaneously.
On January 28, 2020, we conducted the sheltered count and survey of our sheltered population. Then, on January 29th, during the day, we conducted our unsheltered count and survey, including urban adults and youth, including tunnels. On January 30th, our rural count and survey was conducted. One goal we set out to achieve was the completion of 60% of our count being surveyed, meaning that we aimed at a lofty goal of completing 60% of our count through an interview or survey and the other 40% through observation. During this year's count, we conducted 566 surveys of unsheltered individuals. Together, with those surveyed for shelter and unsheltered, we completed 941 surveys in just 2 days. While we can't say percentage-wise what this looks like until our final number is determined, we do know that we were able to obtain more surveys this year than we have in the last couple of years. The census planning team is already working to understand how we can increase this number even more in the years to come.
With the use of technology and a mobile app that our community incorporated in this year's process, we had a team of individuals manning a command center. This allowed us to see numbers and some data in real time. This gave our team a chance to troubleshoot and solve problems as they were happening. And should we need to course correct, we had the ability to do so. Here are some examples of the heat maps that we were able to observe as the surveys and observations were coming in. Each count or survey would become a pin on a map, and as density in those areas grew, our heat map continued to change. This is new technology that we are extremely excited about, as this information can now be presented in a format that allows us to better understand this population we are serving and track shifts and trends among this population for our outreach teams to be more efficient at the work they are doing. In addition to the heat map, we had access to a dashboard that showed us a real-time breakdown of how surveys are being conducted. Please understand, this is only a sample image and is not populated with real information from our community. There has been some discussion around the possibility of making this available at each of the deployment sites for captains to be able to watch and monitor this dashboard as their teams are deployed. In our quest to understand the successes and challenges with this new process, our team conducted listening sessions with volunteers, staff, and deployment captains to learn all that we can about the new methodology. Overall, we received some excellent feedback on the experience of this process. We also received great suggestions and recommendations from various perspectives on how we can make this process even better.
When it came to the shelter count and surveys, our shelters totally owned it. Kudos to them for their willingness to take on this additional piece and new process. 375 surveys were completed. That's 70% of our total bed count. Please note this percentage is based on total available beds, not beds that were filled on the night of the count. While they were able to garner a good number of surveys, the team had some issues with app freezing while their survey was being conducted inside their facilities. In future years, it is worth exploring that should we keep this as part of the process, we will need to work to see if we can enhance the browser and desktop version of this application and explore doing a separate volunteer recruitment effort, particularly for our sheltered count. Thank you to all of the shelters and homeless service providers that participated in this effort.
When it came time to the unsheltered count, generally staff and volunteers liked the move to the daytime. Many individuals felt they were able to see a lot more people and encampments. Many volunteers felt it offered them an opportunity to coordinate with their work schedules. Great feedback was provided on the use and ease of usage of the mobile app during the day. We were able to obtain a great number of peer navigators that assisted at most sites and were helpful in identifying locations. With the increase in deployment sites, we were able to cover more tracks more efficiently as each site had less tracks they had to cover. For the most part, volunteers did not have to travel very far to start to cover their track. Rotating shifts at each deployment site allowed captains the opportunity to provide more one-on-one attention to the volunteers. Things we will want to consider for next year. Maps were confusing and hard to read. Maps for this year did not clearly identify or label streets contained in each tract. Although we did great with our recruitment of peer navigators, we would like to see even more involved in the process. Consideration needs to be given to the tracks that volunteers are provided and asked to canvass and those that peers and staff canvass, with a preference for staff and navigators to canvass those higher density areas. Many communities do a service-based count, which means they invite people to come into various places that provide services or events. Let's have a count party. The survey length still seems to be considerably time-consuming. The survey team during this year's process decided to take the survey down to only the HUD-required questions, but it is still hard to conduct such a lengthy survey, especially for youth. Our community will need to take time to establish some definitions to ensure consistency. For example, an encampment for our community, is it 1 tent, 2 tents, 4 or more tents? This will ensure that everyone entering data on the mobile app receives the same clear instruction and there will be consistency among how information is entered. More clearly defined roles and expectations for volunteers will improve the experience for everyone. While we were able to bring on some great community partners this year and really build relationships with others, we know that there is more to be done. For example, we need to increase collaboration with community partners regarding abatements that occur around our count.
This year, our maps were updated to include information and data provided by the Regional Flood Control on current tunnels throughout our city. This allowed MCIT to more easily canvass their deployments. Help of Southern Nevada championed this process. To consider for next year, the data contained in the maps were updated. However, tunnel access points were not clearly defined as they could have been, and maps without street labels made it considerably difficult to orient teams to the tracks. Collaboration with community partners regarding upcoming abatements would also assist MCIT in preparation of the count.
Historically, our team has relied on work and staffing hours by our outreach teams to cover Southern Nevada's rural areas. However, this year, we took this opportunity to engage rural partners and jurisdictions to canvass Boulder City, Bunkerville, Mesquite, Overton, Laughlin, and Logandale. For next year, census planning teams should consider engaging these areas again to assist with the count and moving the rural count to the same day as the urban unsheltered count. These community volunteers really appreciated being included and knew exactly where to look to find people in their community to conduct the count and surveys. They took pride in their work and communicated easily and clearly with our team.
We appreciate the positive feedback we've received from our partners. From approval from the board to adopt this new methodology until final preparations, the census planning team had a lot to get done in a considerably short amount of time, but we made it happen. For some next steps, now that the count has been conducted, all data has been entered, and with data cleanup well underway, our team, along with the Data and Systems Improvement Working Group, will be working diligently to push out the report and count information this spring. Stay tuned. On behalf of the Census Planning Team, we thank all who participated in the planning and execution of this event.